At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood has lived long enough to see friends turn into people he doesn't know anymore, and supporters turn into big letdowns. The older he gets, the more open he becomes about the people who hurt him badly, instead of leaving good memories. For many years, he kept quiet, letting the movie business gossip, while he hid his hard feelings inside. But time tends to make people lose their patience, and now Clint is finally talking straight about the 6 people he won't forgive. Each story shows a break in a relationship. Some came from betrayal, others from fights, and a few from hurts that never got better. Spike Lee. For Clint Eastwood, the problem with Spike Lee was never just a big public fight. It was a serious clash of strong beliefs that hurt more than usual for a guy who usually hides his feelings. Their argument started in 2008 when Spike Lee, while advertising his movie Miracle at St. Anna, openly criticized Clint for not including black soldiers in Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. Lee's words were direct, saying that 2 movies adding up to more than 4 hours didn't have even one black actor, and he told reporters to ask Clint about it themselves. To Eastwood, the complaint wasn't just about who got cast. It felt like an attack on his honesty, his movies, and the true history he thought he was showing correctly. He answered back strongly, explaining that the 6 men shown raising the flag at Iwo Jima were white, and changing that would mess up the real facts. Then came the comment that killed any chance of making up. Clint said Spike Lee should shut his face. Those 4 words spread all over Hollywood, showing a rare time when Eastwood's usual calm broke. But the trouble between them didn't start there. Clint still remembered Spike asking why a white director was making Bird in 1988, a movie about jazz star Charlie Parker, Clint Eastwood. Its thinking was straightforward. He made the film because nobody else wanted to do it. From his side, Spike had complained without suggesting any better ideas, and that habit hurt more than people knew. As Clint got older, thinking back on years of work, this argument stood for something bigger to him, a difference between generations about how stories get told, who gets shown in them, and who should tell certain histories. Spike later admitted Eastwood was talented, but he couldn't ignore the rude comment, calling it the sound of an angry old man. For Eastwood, the limit had already been crossed. He never mentioned Spike's name again, and the quiet after that spoke louder than any fight. 2 men from different times tried to stand on the same spot, but neither would ever move closer to the other. Dustin Hoffman. Clint Eastwood's problems with Dustin Hoffman were never from personal rude words or public comments. They came from 2 guys who saw acting in totally different ways. To Clint, making movies was about gut feelings, being there in the moment, and catching real emotion in the first or second try. To Hoffman, it was about getting so deep into a character that it took over everything. Their argument wasn't loud yelling. It was a big difference in ideas that made Clint quietly decide he would never work on the same movie set as Hoffman. Hoffman's fame for super intense method acting is well known. During Marathon Man in 1976, he supposedly didn't sleep for 3 days to act like his character who was tired from no sleep. That story went around Hollywood, making some people laugh but annoying others, especially Clint, who thought those ways caused mess instead of real feeling. While Hoffman picked apart every thought and feeling, Eastwood liked things to happen naturally. If the moment wasn't real the first time, Clint thought there was no reason to do tons of takes. He once told another director that too much planning blocks honest storytelling, a comment many people connected straight to Hoffman. Stories from directors only made the difference bigger. Sidney Pollack, who made Tootsie, joked that he'd give back his Oscar if he could get back the year he lost, dealing with Hoffman's need for perfection. Barry Levinson said that during Rain Man, Hoffman's doubts got so bad, he asked to be replaced by Richard Dreyfuss. These stories made Clint sure that Hoffman was everything he didn't like. Too much thinking, unstable emotions, and no trust in how a scene flows naturally. Clint liked sets that ran smoothly. Quiet, fast, clear decisions, while Hoffman's way often turned filming into a long emotional struggle. As years went by, their dislike for each other turned into a cold, quiet distance. Hoffman privately thought Clint's simple style was not deep enough, while Clint saw Hoffman's way as too much extra drama. They were never openly fighting, but the gap between them stayed forever. In Clint's mind, some actors needed too much, took too much, and messed up too much, and Dustin Hoffman was the best example of that kind of trouble. One Clint Eastwood never wanted to deal with. Barbra Streisand. The tension between Clint Eastwood and Barbra Streisand was never about one fight. It came from two strong creative people trying to shape Hollywood in completely opposite ways. Their argument stayed quiet, almost nice on the surface, but underneath it was a basic mismatch that left Clint with a bad feeling he never fully got over. At a time when both actors were becoming directors, their ways of working clashed so much just in talk that working together seemed impossible. Streisand built her career on total control. From the time she signed with Columbia Records at 21, she insisted on picking her own songs, saying no to silly marketing tricks, and wanting full say over everything creative. That same careful control went into her movies. Projects like Yentl took her more than Scheide. 10 years to make because she wouldn't change even one small thing. On her sets, 40 to 60 takes were normal, and every feeling had to be shaped until it fit her exact idea. To Clint, who thought a scene should feel natural, and he hardly ever did more than 2 takes, this kind of close control felt like it was choking everything. He often said that if something wasn't real the first time, it wasn't worth shooting, an idea that was completely against Barbra's search for perfection. But their problem went beyond just style. Streisand faced constant sexism as a woman director in the 1980s and early 1990s. Crews doubted her power. Studios questioned her choices, and even good actors resisted just because they weren't used to a woman directing. She often had to fight twice as hard for half the respect, and that tough world made her guarded, strict, not willing to give in. Clint, on the other hand, walked onto his sets with instant respect and trust. People followed him right away without question. Their experiences were so different that they couldn't even find a middle ground. The closest they got to working together was The Bridges of Madison County. Streisand was first set to direct, but left the project after years of delays. Clint took over, changed the script, and made a quiet, great movie. A silent, hurtful reminder to her of everything she'd fought for. For Clint, it proved that her ways didn't fit with his. For Barbra, it showed how differently Hollywood treated them. They never said mean things in public, but the distance stayed, a cold understanding that some creative ideas just can't work together. And Clint Eastwood never forgot that difference. John Wayne. Among all the breaks in Clint Eastwood's long career, none hurt as surprisingly deep as the quiet, one-sided argument that John Wayne had against him. To Clint, Wayne was the guy he watched growing up. The bite. G symbol of American strength, honor, and the old-school Western hero. But when Eastwood became big in the 1960s and 1970s, with his anti-heroes, quiet gunfighters, and characters who weren't clearly good or bad, he didn't just become the new star of Westerns. In Wayne's eyes, he became a danger to what the genre meant. The older Wayne never hid his dislike, but how strong it was surprised Clint. The main moment came in 1973 with High Plains Drifter, directed by Eastwood. The movie showed the West as a dark, crooked place, and the stranger Clint played was less a classic hero and more a ghostly punisher. Wayne hated it. To him, the film made fun of the ideas he had defended his whole life. He believed Westerns should honor the pioneers, show good beating evil, and keep the pure American story. So when Clint wrote to him asking him to work on a movie called The Hostiles, Wayne didn't just say no nicely. He sent a harsh letter blaming Clint for ruining the spirit of the Old West. It wasn't really about the people who pioneered the West, Wayne wrote. To Clint, the attack felt oddly personal, especially from someone he looked up to. What made the hurt worse was how different their ideas really were. Wayne saw Westerns as proud symbols of the country, showing strength and clear right and wrong. Eastwood saw them as tales, stories meant to question those same myths. He later said Wayne wouldn't get High Plains Drifter because they came from different generations living in different Americas. The Duke wanted to protect an older view of the country. Clint wanted to look at the dark sides behind it. They never worked together. The letter was the closest they got. And when Wayne died in 1979, Clint kept the argument quiet, talking about it only with a kind of sad understanding. It wasn't rage. It was realizing that two men from the same type of movies could be worlds apart on what a hero should be. Fritz Lang's. Wait, actually the script says Fritz. Maine's, but context suggests it's likely Malpaso producer Fritz Menes. Of all the people Clint Eastwood quietly removed from his life, Fritz Menes was the one that hurt differently. Not because of ideas, pride, or art fights, but because this was a guy who had been with him since they were kids. They met in the 1940s as teens in Oakland, long before Clint became a world star, and long before Menes became one of his most trusted behind-the-scenes helpers. For years, they were close on set. Menes produced or helped on 13 of Clint's movies. From the tough thrillers of the 1970s to the war dramas of the mid-1980s, their friendship lasted through hard times, long filming, studio problems, and the constant stress of Hollywood. But it wouldn't last through one bad movie production. That turning point happened during Heartbreak Ridge in 1986. The movie needed tight work with the U.S. Marine Corps, and Menes was in charge of handling the military's role, making sure things were real, correct, and smooth. Instead, the filming turned into big trouble with the Department of Defense. Military leaders publicly said they didn't support the movie, calling it wrong and badly handled. For Clint, who acted in, directed, and produced the film, the embarrassment was huge. He felt caught off guard, thinking Menes had failed at the most important job. The trust built over 40 years broke right away. What came next was even harder. In later interviews, especially ones quoted in Patrick McGilligan's biography, Clint, the life and legend, Menes described Clint as cold, bossy, and not willing to share praise. He said that anyone getting credit on a Clint Eastwood set was lucky, and working with him always risked getting dropped. These words weren't just complaints, they felt like a stab in the back. For Clint, being loyal was the most important thing. Hearing that from someone he once saw as a brother left a bad taste he never talked about openly. They never made up, never worked together again, and hardly talked after the mess. The sad part wasn't big fights or loud scenes. It was the slow end of a friendship that lasted a lifetime. When Clint thinks back on the people who let him down most, Menes is different from the rest. The others pushed against him. This one really hurt him. George Clooney. The split between Clint Eastwood and George Clooney was never about one fight or a rude moment. It was the slow growing apart of two guys who stood for different times, different views of the world, and in the end, different ideas of what Hollywood and America should mean. Clooney looked up to Clint when he was younger. He openly said Eastwood helped create the modern plan, make one big money movie to pay for two personal ones. But looking up to someone doesn't cancel out big differences in beliefs. And as Clooney's political speaking out got louder and more worldwide, Clint's liking for him quietly faded away. Clooney became one of Hollywood's loudest voices in the 2000s and 2010s, supporting human rights causes, criticizing government actions, and using his fame to push politics. He was arrested outside the Sudanese embassy in Washington, D.C. In 2012, he helped start foundations, paid for watchdog programs, and wrote opinion pieces calling for big political changes, including his 2024 New York Times article asking the current president to step down. For many, Clooney's work was brave. For Eastwood, it felt like something else, mixing movies and politics in a way he never thought should happen. Clint was never without political views, not at all, but he kept his art separate from his public talking. Except for the famous 2012 Republican National Convention empty chair speech, he liked letting his movies talk, keeping politics away from his image. To him, a star's job wasn't to preach, but to make art. Clooney, in his view, was part of a new generation that used fame to shout opinions instead of focusing on the work. And though Clint never attacked him openly, people close to him say the distance was clear. Yet under the belief differences was something quieter, the change between generations. Clooney came up in a Hollywood built on groundwork Clint had helped lay. He accepted speaking out, getting involved publicly, and liberal politics because the business had changed. Clint never changed with that and never wanted to. The respect between them didn't vanish, but it got tense, covered by two completely different ideas about what an artist should do. They never argued loudly, never said mean things in interviews or speeches. But in Clint Eastwood's quiet style, he made the choice. Some gaps aren't meant to be closed, especially when core beliefs, who you are, and your legacy are on opposite sides. After almost a century in Hollywood, Clint Eastwood has learned that being successful doesn't shield you from letdowns, and getting old doesn't wipe away memories of people who wronged you. These 6 names stuck with him not because of rage, but because each one marked a big change in his life, his career, or his beliefs. Now the question is simple. Whose side are you on? Which of these 6 surprised you the most? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories just like this. Your support helps us uncover the truths behind Hollywood's biggest legends. Point 2s. Fast.